Do you want me to mute? Or?
Hey everyone, I hope everyone enjoyed the session so far. I thought the GC panel discussion was super interesting, and thanks to Nicholas for moderating that. Up next, we have Emily's talk. So Emily is a long-time functional programming user and an independent researcher interested in category theory and other things. She's also done some work around profunctor optics, and recently she's also been maintaining really a growing number of critical Haskell packages, for example, Cabal. And today she joins us as a CTO of the Haskell Foundation. The Haskell Foundation is an initiative that was launched in November. Today she's going to talk about the progress the Haskell Foundation has made since. So before I give the mic over to Emily, don't forget that you can ask any sort of questions in the talk discussion channel in our Discord channel. So Emily, the floor is yours.
All right, let me get to my slides here. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here, giving my first talk as the Haskell Foundation CTO, which is fantastic. It's been a really great journey over the past year or so since we started building the foundation, and then all the way up to today, where we're happy to report some great progress in the 4 short months that we've kind of been fully launched. So, yeah, nothing super technical today, but I do want to make it a talk where, I give you guys an update in terms of, where we are in the foundation and what we're going to be working on, in the next quarter or the next 2 quarters, and then also future plans that we have for new technical projects and, events in the community. We'd really like to get people interested in this because obviously the foundation is for you guys and is dictated by things that you guys want. So the more feedback we get, the more good stuff we can have, and the happier everyone will be. So let's get started here. We're going to have a lot of content today, but we're not going to have a full hour and 15 minutes of content here. So I'm going to open up the last sort of maybe 25 minutes, 30 minutes to questions from whoever has a question along the way, or you can ask in real time, and I'll definitely answer those. I'm relying on Jasper to sort of field those questions. But don't be afraid if you want clarification or you want some kind of more information on a particular subject. I'm happy to answer. But we're going to go over what are we, for people who are kind of new to the whole Haskell Foundation thing. You might have heard of it, you might have heard of us, and maybe in passing, and you want to get involved or you want to know how to contact us and that kind of thing. What we're currently working on in terms of technical community projects, our funding status for this year, and kind of where we want to be in a year or 2, right? So, who am I? Jasper gave an introduction. I'm a Haskell programmer. I've been a Haskell programmer professionally for 4 years now. I am happy to say I like it. I still want to work in Haskell. I've found tons of interesting, ways to use Haskell over the past few years, and I really like writing libraries in those areas. So there's a lot of sort of weird little geometric things that I'm interested in, or mining different sort of algebraic spaces that I see we kind of need. So I've been working a lot on algebra and topology and geometry with Haskell, as well as some more mundane, sort of closer to the metal kind of stuff, like the base encoding library, so providing us a decent modern sort of base 64, base 32, base 16 take. And I'm happy to present those to everyone. They're free. Feel free to check them out and fork them and improve them. Tell me I'm totally wrong in my approach and help me improve them. And in particular, want to help me with sort of SIMD work on the base 16 and 64 side. I would love it if someone could help me with that. All right. So, as Jasper said, I am currently serving as the CTO of the Haskell Foundation. So what is the Haskell Foundation? And what is CTO? Well, we'll go over this. What do I actually do? We at the Haskell Foundation are trying to build a general framework, a nonprofit framework, to try and hold Haskell's disparate bureaucratic processes together and volunteer efforts together as well, and see if we can't provide a sort of cohesive view of Haskell as it enters industry. So, there are some, Haskell traditionally has been more of an academic language where, people would do their PhD thesis, it would get into GHC, it would, push the state-of-the-art forward, which is great. We want to keep that. But also, how do we make Haskell easier to digest for the broader mainstream industry? And this is an additive process. It's not necessarily going to be taking away from the academic side. It's going to look at, okay, what are the bits that maybe we haven't focused on as a more theoretically inclined community, and how do we fill them? Like, what are the gaps? How do we fill them? In most cases, it comes down to funding. So you look at a language like Rust or like Scala, they have an incredible amount of funding, millions and millions of dollars coming from folks like Morgan Stanley and Mozilla, that Haskell just doesn't have. And actually, surprisingly and impressively, Haskell is almost entirely strung together by volunteers. We made it this far just on volunteer effort, which is incredible. But if we want to scale, there are hard parts of industry adoption that aren't really very appealing to people in general, that you kind of need to pay someone to actually do. You can learn more about this approach. We've got an entire vision statement on the website, which is kind of Simon's long missive about why we should exist and what the ethos and bent of the foundation is supposed to be, and kind of what the key points we're trying to follow are. He also has a keynote where he explains this. It's on the front page of the site. You can choose either the vision tab or watch the site movie, and you'll get the same gist. But that's what we do, right? So this comes down to a few different things, right? So we want this picture where we are the ones who are able to organize, for instance, the different committees, the different sort of critical library teams, the core libraries teams, sort of help Haskell.org when they need help the Haddock team when they need help, and so on. And more importantly, we'd like to provide that kind of dialogue that helps resolve some of the tension between, say, the Stack and the Cabal teams, where there's some sort of historical infighting. Well, we've managed to kind of make inroads and help heal that divide, and hopefully put us on a more productive track in the future going forward with our build tools. So we fully launched, we initially launched in November of 2020 with the Skills Matter Haskell Exchange keynote that Simon gave, but we didn't fully launch until February 22nd, 2021. We're only 4 months old. We have two staff. We have Andrew Boardman, the executive director, and myself as CTO. And it's our job, basically, to help get this thing rolling and gain momentum and organize volunteers until we come to a point where perhaps funding is good enough that we can have, maybe 4 or 5 full-time employees, and help provide release cycles for GHC, and help manage the branding process, and various volunteer efforts and so on. So we have big plans. We do plan to expand. We don't plan on getting huge, but we do plan on having a few people who can help sort of professionally manage a lot of these processes that are just strung together by volunteers without sort of cohesive lead. In the case of GHC, for example, we have Ben Gamar leading everything, and he's very burnt out. Sorry, Ben. But it would be really great if we could get him somebody who can do some sort of project lead management, who can organize people so that maybe he can focus on GHC more full time. And we can reap all the benefits of a full Ben focused on GHC, as opposed to a half Ben, where half of Ben is focused on CI and people management, and then the other half is focused on GHC. So this is about getting the best out of everybody and making sure that no one person is kind of taking on too much. Right? So that's what we're focused on. We have a board of advisors who oversees Andrew and myself. This consists of Ed Kmet, Michael Snoyman, Simon Peyton Jones himself. On the interim board, we had Simon Marlowe giving us ideas, and sort of Nikki Vazu, and a whole bunch of really cool people from industry, like the Obsidian and Tweak folks like Ryan or Richard Eisenberg and Ryan Trinkle, and so on. So we have a mix of academic folks as well as industry folks, and we're all kind of focused on making sure the Haskell Foundation succeeds and that no one viewpoint kind of supersedes another. So there's always a dialogue. The full list, these slides will be online on the Haskell Foundation GitHub, which I'll post after the fact, but you can see the full list on the website. It's haskell.foundation if you want to go see now. And it's just the who we are tab. Yeah, so we discuss things really publicly. One of the major driving forces in what we do is making sure that everything we have is transparent. There's no sort of backroom dealings. There's no secret Slacks. There's no, sort of secret IRC channels going on for the Haskell Foundation. Everything's above board. We have our formal board decisions in a mailing list. All the blue is going to be a link, so you can click on these later. All of our formal working group decisions and requests for commentary are going on in the Haskell discourse. Our informal discussion and general day-to-day organizational activities are going on in a public Slack that everyone is free to join, and these slides do have the invite. Or you can just message one of us, and we can get you an invite. Generally, you can probably message any of the board members or myself or Andrew. We'll throw you an invite and so on. Right? It's also on the site, so it's you can find it under resources. Yeah. And so far, we've got around 250 people who are volunteering, discussing, and otherwise just sort of providing their time, their commentary, and generally just talking, because sometimes it's good to just hang out. It's totally fine if you want to come and just lurk, or maybe just have a conversation with somebody every now and then. We've got one guy in there, Digital Kiwi, who isn't in any track, but he's just been posting his cool Haskell stickers that he makes at home, and they're great. And we'll probably ask if we can use some of those for some of our swag and merchandise. So there's lots of cool stuff that just getting together and talking to each other. We hope that we can serve as a volunteering hub as well as a general sort of community gathering place if you want to get involved with any forward-leaning projects that we have. Right. So where are we now? It's been 4 months. We're doing well, is the gist of it. Funding looks stable. We have a bunch of volunteers. We're always seeking more. We think we can do more projects with more volunteers. Andrew and I are doing well in terms of getting the organization together, getting the org charts all set up, and sort of the ways of working stuff all taken care of. The board is doing most of the ways of working stuff, as well as our sort of bylaws and making sure that we're well-founded. Funding does help. This is not going to be a funding pitch deck. I do not want to make this about that. But, if you know somebody, it's good to know. It's good to know that, they can contact us. And, more funding means more ambitious projects on our part. So, on one hand, we have volunteers where we can do more things, but they tend to be a little bit smaller because we only have so much bandwidth. But more funding means we can do bigger and better things. And, the more we want to, do cool, sort of groundbreaking, community-shifting stuff, the better, but the more funding we need. So we have contact details on the website. These will obviously be in the slides as well. Right. So what's my job? My role is to help organize decisions for how Haskell is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. It's what do we need, what do we want, and how do we get there? So, for example, there are things we need. We need, for instance, the GHC team needs help with gathering people and getting PRs in, and maybe getting faster feedback loops with the core libraries and that kind of thing. We can help organize that. That's a need. But what do we want? We all kind of love Haskell. We wanted linear types. We want dependent Haskell. Well, at least some of us do. I definitely do. But what else do we want? Do we want like better IDEs? Do we want shoot, I'm blanking. Better IDEs? Do we want better profiling tools? Do we want an easier onboarding experience, more educational materials, and that kind of thing? So I'd like to shift us out of this mindset where instead of thinking, oh yeah, what works? What else do we kind of, what do we need to tweak, or what kind of hacks do we need to tell people about in order to get things working? I want to ask, what does Haskell want to look like in 5 years? Do we want to catch up with Rust? Do we want to, have a better RTS? Do we want profiling or program coverage that actually works? Do we want, your kit for Haskell, that kind of thing? So we can be ambitious in the way that we talk about this stuff. And we can be the ones that actually drive that effort forward if we think it's a good idea. So I officially work on Haskell's technical agendas, our technical projects. I manage the working group for it. We kind of bring in ideas from everywhere, from our friend groups, from things that are discussed on Discourse and on Reddit, and things in IRC that we see need help, with feedback from industry and that kind of thing. And we say, okay, for the next 2 quarters, these are the things we're going to work on, and this is when we can get them done, and so on. So this ranges from finding maintainers for libraries, getting them set up with good infrastructure for maintaining those libraries, funding projects. One example is we've offered to pay for GHC CI setup because you need sort of better Windows, FreeBSD, and Mac boxes, for example. They have existing ones, but maybe they need more. We've offered to pay for that. We can help with organizing new projects. We can help with moving existing efforts forward. So for example, the text UTF-8 stuff that we'll talk about in just a sec was one of those examples. But in general, we try and support existing tech as a priority, and only rarely do we want to actually be in the business of inventing something new. So in general, there's probably at least 1 or 2 groups of people who have probably done the thing that we're trying to do as a project. So we try and contact those people, or at least post publicly so that they can come in and comment and say, hey, why didn't you think of me? and we'll become aware of those people and then work with them. A good example of this is the unified installer proposal that we've been working on, which we'll get to in a sec, where we said, hey, we don't know of any effort to really do this in the space, and then it turned out that the GHC Up folks had been working on a Windows solution that worked well with us, and we're working with them, and that's just sort of circle of life for us, right? Hopefully we'll have that done in the next few months. So, and we also hope to tackle the educational deficit that we see between, for example, how to go from hobbyist Haskeller to professional Haskeller. How do you bridge that gap? And how do you provide proof that you understand that gap and maybe understand the concepts that people want to see from Haskell business use case. And this will help inform business and make business better. And then the more successful businesses, the more Haskell jobs come available because people actually like it and deliver, and it improves the overall reputation. And then we get more people sort of learning how to be professional Haskellers, and then circle of life, more Haskell jobs. Right? And you're happy to come. We're happy to answer any questions on this. So if there are questions, just in general about any of these things that come up, feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to answer any of them. Right. So what are we working on now? So we are focused on figuring out how to improve the user and developer experience for Haskell. Right. So like I said, we like to find maintainers who can support critical infrastructure. We like to help funding projects, blessing new or existing tech. So this basically means sometimes there's a little bit of confusion in terms of which libraries to actually use. For example, if I were new to Haskell and I were to search on Hackage for a JSON library, I would see JSON. I would also see ASON. I would probably choose JSON if I didn't know what I was really doing, and I would probably be okay, but a little disappointed considering everyone else uses ASON, and I probably wouldn't be familiar with that library if I went to go contribute to someone else's. But we definitely want to acknowledge the fact that there are industry standards and be amenable and flexible to new ones coming in, but we do want to acknowledge and point to good solutions that already exist. So for example, the YAML libraries, you have YAML or HSYAML, or for TOML, you have TOMLand, and so on, right? So these are all, this is important and useful in and of itself. We also are hoping to help organize new projects. So for example, the sort of unified Haskell installer project is brand new. There wasn't a ton of design in the space, but it turns out there was some existing overlap, and now we're sort of pushing that forward with an existing base so that we can get it done quickly, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel and stomp on somebody else's project, right? Right. So how does it work, right? So we kind of depend on the community for input in terms of what we want. And there's some discussion, but for the most part, people submit ideas to the Slack, to the work group, to Discord, to Reddit, and so on. And we kind of harvest them and say, okay, is this a good idea? If we were to flesh this out, is this sort of too much work for us in the meantime? Is this too long of a project for what we have currently in scope? Is this something that we want to consider for later? And that kind of thing. Right? We meet every Tuesday to kind of discuss this stuff, and it's more of a stand-up right now because we are in the midst of I think 6 projects, maybe 5 projects actually. But people are free to join whenever. There's a calendar, which I would have to ask Ben Gomari where we put that, but I believe it's on the Discord. And there's a Jitsi link. It's free to join. Anyone can join any of these meetings that are actually open. And come ask questions. We rarely fill up the full hour at this point because we are just doing sort of stand-up and reporting. But if somebody comes in, they say, why haven't you guys done this? Or please listen to my idea. We're happy to field that either in the stand-up or on the Slack. And probably Slack's a little bit better for new ideas. So keep that in mind. Okay. Whenever we have a decision made about a thing that we want to do, we usually will post a sort of preliminary proposal on the discourse. It'll serve mostly as an RFC, unless it's a declaration of intent. It's more of like, we want to do this, what do you think? As opposed to, we're going to do this, come hell or high water. We want your feedback, right? The more people can point out problems with any of the choices that we make, the better, the earlier and more frequent, the better. And we will hone our proposals, or maybe if they are blocked on a particular thing, then we'll table them until they become sort of more mature. But for the most part, I think we've only had one that's actually hit any snags so far, but the rest are pretty straightforward. It's mostly a matter of organizing people. Right? And we're perfectly happy to say that, if prior art exists, we probably want to look at that. We don't want to stomp on anyone. It's not really a feasible thing for us to be totally omniscient of every project out there. We recognize that we're human. We don't know everybody. So if we do post a proposal and you say, hey, this already exists, then we're definitely going to take a look at it. So I would treat these proposals as our RFCs on the discourse. And once they're accepted into the sort of final tech repository as proposals, which means they've been ratified by the board, then we'll probably just go ahead with what we said. Okay. So here's a link to an example. This is actually the Haskell installer proposal. We're actually, Julian Oswald Merwald came in and said, hey, I'm already doing some of this. Why didn't you consult me? And that's exactly why we post. So people like this will come out and say, hey, look, I exist. Please work with me. And we did. And we've teamed up to use some of his ideas and smash them together against our own, and we've come up with something that's pretty cool, right? So we have a few projects that we're working on now. This is the exciting part. We're doing the UTF-8 by default text conversion. So we've got Andrew Lilachenko, who also is known as Bodegrim. He's the maintainer of ByteString at the moment, as well as a few other sort of core libraries, packages, some of his own really cool ones as well. He's taken on the effort to do, 99% of the work to convert text to being UTF-8 encoded by default. And this is an effort that I think really highlights kind of how we've been able to be successful in this space. A lot of the problems that Haskell has are problems of management and structure and cat herding. Text UTF-8 has been a thing in Haskell for 10 years, I believe, since Jasper Vanderhout's GSOC, Google Summer of Code project. And it was denied for good reasons at the time. But as we sort of evolved and sort of understood what we wanted as a community, we kind of decided almost unanimously that UTF-8 encoded text is probably a better default. And there's been some attempt at it in the form of Herbert Valerio Riedel's text UTF-8 project that never really got finalized for various life reasons. But we've been able to pick this up and say, hey, we can do this. We have all the people ready to just implement the thing. Why not just do it? So we submitted our proposal to the community. We said, hey, we want to do this. What do you think? And there was overwhelming support. We got it in and approved within, I think, something like a month or two. And, we're going to have it delivered by the end of the summer. After 10 years of being blocked and only 4 years into the Haskell Foundation, 4 months into the Haskell Foundation's lifetime. So we've been able to get up and moving extremely quickly to the point where we're actually kind of running out of projects that we want to do early on. So we've only been around for a quarter. We had what we thought were 2 quarters worth of projects, and we've almost chewed through all of these. So it's been really, really rewarding to see, yes, this is exactly what we need in order to move things forward. And 2, people are really excited about this, and the volunteer efforts have been really phenomenal in response to us just saying, hey, look, now you have authority to do the thing that we wanted to do because we're the ones organizing it, and you're not going to get blocked by anybody. Obviously this takes special care where you have to make sure that everybody is is on board with this, because it is a big weapon to be swinging around. But we go through so many levels of approval processes that we can be sure that when we do a thing, it's probably a good thing because we have enough eyes seeing it. Two, we have this unified Haskell installer experience. So basically, if I wanted to, just to explain it, be on Windows and I wanted to install, GHC standalone or Cabal standalone or HLS standalone or Stack standalone, I can do that. We're planning on using this great GHC up tool to kind of be the thing that installs, everything for the most part. I don't know if there will be a rebranding of GHC up to something else. I kind of like GHC up, but we're working on, if you want to just get up and running on any operating system, how do you do it? Well, use this. And now we have one thing to point to as opposed to 3 different things to point to, for people to install. That's great. We're helping to fund GHC CI setup. So there was some tension. It's a little less of a tension now due to some credits coming in, but GHC CI setup needs a lot of love. We've gotten some generous contributions from folks at Microsoft Research, for example. But sometimes, you want big, beefy machines. And it turns out they're not really expensive. It's just that, in-kind contributions are not necessarily the ones that you really want. They're the ones you need, not necessarily the ones you want. And we are happy to sort of fill in those gaps and get Ben, the boxes he wants so that he can test GHC on, higher performance boxes. Great. He's also been working on performance dashboards for the GHC and core libraries, along with Matthew Pickering of Well-Typed, who's, great contribution. Thank you. To get us something like, are we fast yet for Rust, but for Haskell, right? So we want to see sort of nice data visualizations of performance regressions and improvements in GHC, as well as many of our core and critical libraries. So we want to set up, dashboards for ASON and for byte string and for vector and text and so on. And we want people to be able to see, how performance is improving over time, as well as sort of highlight any regressions. And, it's easier to see kind of what needs help and so on. So we're just doing that as a kind of nice sort of POC. It's cool. We've got a thing called Project Matchmaker, which allows you to hook up, volunteers with prospective maintainers who want, volunteers for their projects. Maybe they're asking for help. We have a nice sort of cool framework for people connecting with these maintainers and sort of soliciting their help for various things.
We have a question from the chat about the unified Haskell installer experience. So someone is asking if this will lead us to a scenario where you sort of like have 3 things and they don't really work together very well, but then in the end you end up with 4 things instead of 3.
Well, 4 things instead of 3. What do you mean by that?
Sorry, I'm referring to the famous XKCD.
Okay.
Yeah.
The new standards kind of thing.
Right.
I don't think so, because we have these things already, but we're finding a way to package them all in one thing. We're not inventing anything new really when it comes to the installer. We're basically saying, okay, Cabal's really hard to install on Windows. How do we make it easier to install on Windows? Stack is easy to install on Windows. How do we package it all up so that if I were installing Haskell from scratch on Windows, before there would be 3 things, but now there's 1 thing, and it gets you those 3 things, but it installs them in a way that isn't disjointed. You don't have 3 separate manuals to read. You don't have sort of 3 separate install proposal, or sorry, not proposals, install procedures. You don't have 3 separate sort of path variables that you have to manage, manually and so on. Maybe we just have a thing which does all that stuff automatically for you, because there is a relatively cohesive way that you can just install these things and do it automatically. It's more of something like the Haskell platform, as opposed to building something brand new and adding yet another standard for people to work with. Like, you're still getting the old things. It's just there's an automatic way of installing them now, which is principled and manageable. That's it.
Thank you.
So I don't think we're doing anything new here. We're just making it easier to work with. I know for a lot of us, actually, I think Simon's probably the only one I know who actually uses Windows. But for a lot of us, it's incredibly difficult to manage something like a GHC setup, like a manual install over time. Like, it's easy to do it once, but it's difficult to do it automatically and have it evolve. And same with Cabal. Cabal's I maintain Cabal. It's a friggin' nightmare on Windows. It would be great if we could just get something like, click, click. Okay, great. I have Cabal now. Thumbs up. So yeah, we're trying not to invent anything new here. That's the gist. Right. So just the last point. We also tend to focus on educational materials. So if we see sort of deficits in the discourse for Haskell, we kind of want to fill those gaps in the discourse. And one of the things that we noted was that programming is really hard, and in particular, tuning a program is really hard. And there's no real sort of coherent story for how to tune a program and what tools to use. I know this is kind of foreign to a lot of people in the audience, because you're probably experienced Haskell users, but I've asked several people, like, what do you use for profiling? And I profile a lot myself, so I have a particular tool set, and I'll ask people, like, what do you use? And the answer in a lot of cases is still HP2PS for reading heap profiles, or like, oh yeah, I still use ThreadScope. This shows that even really experienced Haskellers, folks working on, in one case, one of them was a person working on GHC. There's not really a good dialogue for what to use, how to use it, how to extract the best kind of data for particular types of programs, and more importantly, like, how do we have a cohesive story for where performance tuning tools are going if we don't even know kind of where we are by consensus in the community? So one of the things that we're going to be working on is a kind of, how to attack certain problems and what tech to use in a sort of community style, MD book style led effort, which is actually being led by Gil Mizrahi right now. You might know him as Gilme on the discourse or on Slack or Twitter or something. And we're trying to fill that gap. So we're trying to teach as much as we do sort of push new things forward. Right. So we've almost got the proposals for that one ready. 4 of these are in progress. The CI stuff, I think it's just waiting on approval or a more appropriate time. The performance tuning book is in progress. We're choosing topics. And the proposal will probably be ready in the next few weeks or so. So if you want to get in on that, talk to Gilme on the Slack, and you can talk to me as well. I'm sort of helping out with that. And submit some topics. You can see kind of what we've already been working on, what we've been deciding, and I'm happy to field new suggestions. Right. I've already talked about this. So yeah, one thing to note is how we choose is a little bit subjective. It's very sort of network based. and feedback based. So, the more people talk to us, the better. This includes people from industry. So if you're a manager or a lead and you have a particular gripe, or you have, some subject matter expert, maybe you're Neil Mitchell or something, come to us, tell us what your gripes are. We'd love to hear them. We want to know what's wrong with Haskell for you, what's making, the hurdle higher than it needs to be. And maybe we can find a way of solving those issues. Right? So we have plans for the future, like I said. Pending funding and pending bandwidth, a few of the things that we're going to be working on over the next few quarters or so are like really, really impactful. And we'd really like to get to all of these. But, there's only so much bandwidth. So, the more funding we can do, the better the projects can be, the more ambitious they can be. The more volunteers we have, the more we can take on at once. So it's kind of, they're slightly orthogonal, but, we want to be able to do all of these at some point. So, pending volunteer-based size and pending funding, we'd like to attack at least 2 of these over the next 2 quarters. So for example, one of the big ticket items that I wanted is, as we were sort of building the foundation, was a stable API for GHC. This has so many knock-on effects that are going to be good for basically everybody. So for instance, tooling comes to mind. HLS, which I think most people are coalescing on as a standard for the IDE in the community, does some things substandard, more substandard than it should do it. That's not due to any sort of developer error or any sort of shortcoming of the team. It's because the tools that they're working with aren't the best. GHC's API is, in some cases, non-existent. And at the very least, it isn't stable in a lot of cases. There's a subset that is stable. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say that, but it would be really, really nice to have, for example, hooks into the build system, hooks into the profiling systems, like live monitoring, that kind of thing. It would be extremely nice to be able to, improve error messages, parse them, format them, and be able to do that in a performant way that isn't sort of parsing stringly typed error messages. It would also help us with tools, just in general. So managing sort of multiple components is one that comes to mind that would be extremely useful for an IDE. Or multiple home components for better REPL experiences, which I believe Fender was working on. There's an effort to do this. This is stuff that would seriously benefit from an API. We would love to start talking to the GHC team, to folks like Simon Marlowe, to SPJ, anyone who's working on GHC, to help scope that out, and hopefully we'll have enough volunteers in time who can sort of manage that effort that we can probably get that done, at least an MVP, right? So another one that comes to mind is one of my personal pet peeves, which is something that I'm willing to take up and lead at some point if I have bandwidth. But the state of Haskell program coverage. It currently doesn't have an owner in GHC. I don't know how many people knew this, but it comes bundled with GHC, when you download it, and it was very good back in the day. There's been a little bit of sort of improvements to common standards since then, since it was released, and there hasn't been a ton of work on it, and it's kind of janky at this point, but I think it's something that we could really help dust off and sort of make more modern, and maybe start using more as a community, because I know most of the people that I've spoken to about this don't use it because it's kind of got a pretty poor user experience, but very, very simple to fix user experience bugs. We can help talk about that one. We'd like to have a sort of Rust book style Haskell book. That's something we'll probably be attacking regardless of volunteer size or funding, mostly because we have enough people who are interested in it. But if you're interested in it, feel free to talk to Gilmy again. We're probably going to take that on after the performance tuning book. So, feel free to talk to us if you want to lead it. We can just do it now. Improved profiler tooling is on the menu. I know Matt Pickering was working on this as well. But in the glorious future, I would like to see something like your kit for Haskell. Right? I want to be able to see everything that's going on in my program, including sort of thread state and garbage collection and all that stuff. So maybe we can work towards something like that. And if I want to connect to something like live monitoring socket API, maybe I want to have a live heat profile over time. I want to see if I can get that done in GHC too. And then most importantly, and I think Richard's already working on this, but we want better error messages for GHC, right? This is a common complaint. This one is actually ready to go now. If somebody wants to help work on this, we need someone to help spec out the data structures and general API for error messages in GHC, and Richard and I can help sort of manage that process. So get in touch with one of us if you want to write better error messages for GHC, and we will thank you profusely. I think everyone will.
So I have one question from the channel. Yes. So the question is if beyond the community-led book that you mentioned, if there's also been discussions about funding other books, and the person who asked the question also referred to the Voids of Haskell blog post. Have you read that?
The
Voids of Haskell. I think the point in that blog post is I think that there should be some more practical books as well.
I can think of a few. I haven't read it, but I'd be happy to look at a link. I know one area which I imagine that book or that post probably talks about is general service design and architecture, which is another candidate for how do you write a service, right? But I think who is it? Alexander Graninas has a book on this. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see what the post says, but I'm happy to just to sort of attack the question here. I'm happy to consider different topics. This is not an exhaustive list. If you have a good idea and you have enough people who are going to work on it, or you can find enough people to help volunteer, I'm happy to help include this in our tech proposals and get it started. I mean, it's as easy as that. If you want to do something, I'm happy to help lead it, or help manage it, or help drive it forward, whatever you need. So if you have an idea, let's talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So community efforts have been going well too. We have Hecate, who's also known as Kleidukos or Techno Empress in various different formats. They've been helping with documentation, like for most of their time, constantly. They did helped lead the GHC documentation efforts and a lot of sort of core libraries documentation efforts, and they're currently working on other things too. I'd like to work with them on getting a COBOL user guide together, for example. This isn't necessarily a Haskell Foundation effort, but in terms of community contributions, like you want someone who, they're also the maintainer of Haddock. So if you want somebody who can, improve documentation in general, improve the state of Haddock, and sort of organize, or someone you can ask who can help organize efforts and documenting any one area, they're the one to go to. So if you ever see them around and you have some sort of documentation pet peeve, or you want to, little help pointing yourself in the direction of sort of helpful contributions, you know, give Hecate a call. Don't put more work on their shoulders, but you know, they already do enough. But if you need help finding out, you know, what needs to be documented, what needs, you know, sort of volunteer efforts, they're the one to go to. Okay. One of the things that they're working on is actually this project matchmaker that I had listed in the tech project, but it's really more of a community effort. It's how do you link up volunteers with maintainers? You know, if you want to contribute to a Haskell project, how do you get started? And you know, who needs help? This is a sort of general framework for you know, getting two people together to meet and talk things out and sort of make GSOC style conversation happen year round. And it's got a pretty slick UI. You can view this all on the GitHub. We are github.com/Haskell Foundation, all one word, no dash. Haskell Foundation is the foundation suite of libraries from Vincent Hankes. So try not to confuse us. I get confused all the time. But, under the project matchmaker repository, you can see some snippets of kind of what they're trying to do and sort of how to build the existing project and so on. And they definitely need help building that if you want to help build that too. Right, and Hecate always needs help. So, you know, the more you can help, the better. Yeah, Gilles Mizrahi is doing the performance tuning book. We would love for people to help write it. So obviously, the more writers, the better. If we can assign, you know, a section or a chapter, you know, it doesn't need to be the whole thing. You don't need to commit to 100% of the book. It's fine to do chunks. You know, the more people do chunks, the faster we can get it done. Right. And there's other community things too. And this is a bit of a contentious topic, but you know, we want to run good communities, not just communities, right? So one of the sort of generous things that the Rust Foundation and the Rust teams in general have offered to do is, you know, they're stoked on seeing us succeed. And one of the things that they really want to succeed is their notion of good community, and not necessarily the same community. So, you know, hold your horses. But the good community standards that they set. And these are sort of very well-written and generic standards for interacting with one another and interacting with us that we kind of want to make sure are the standards for, you know, working within Haskell Foundation community efforts. So, for example, you've heard of the guidelines for respectful communication that Simon Peyton Jones and the other folks wrote for the GHC steering committee. Those work fine for committees, but in general, you know, when things scale, things get a little bit hairier and harder to handle, and we basically want a concrete set of moderation practices and sort of you know, codes of conduct that don't really inhibit anyone in particular, but just provide the correct sort of, you know, punitive language and moderation guidelines and community guidelines that allows everyone to kind of work together without having to constantly clash. You know, absent of these kinds of things, I think things become a little bit more polarized and a little bit harder to get along with. And it's just nicer to know that there's, you know, if someone wrongs you, you have a, you know, a fallback. And this goes for basically anyone, right? You know, we're not trying to kick anyone out or close the doors on anyone, as long as they, you know, adhere to the sort of respectful and professional community guidelines that are set down. And, you know, we don't want to be the ones to set this ourselves because, you know, we're human. We're probably not going to get it right. But the Rust Foundation at least has a proven model that we can point to that says, okay, you know, they're very successful. Let's use theirs, and they can help us do it. And it's known to be very open and sort of, you know, positive for everyone. Right. And in the future, funding permitting, we do have bigger plans for what we want to do with the community. Not in terms of moving you around or doing anything in particular, but things we want to provide as a sort of a nice give back, right? So we want to have those sort of in-person conferences, right? We want to hold a Haskell conference. And we'd like to make sure that all of our volunteers are sort of in one place, and we can thank our donors, and we can get sort of beginner and professional conference talks together. And I'm presenting this at Zurich. I'm sorry, Jasper. We're not going to be a rival, a one-to-one rival, but we do want to have something that's sort of Haskell specific, that we're just kind of using as a give back to the community, right? Something nice to have, where we can shower you with stickers and that kind of thing. Yeah. So some of the other stuff is, educational materials, which we haven't fully fleshed out yet, but we have been, talking with folks like Well Typed and SimSpace to see if we can provide something like a course for industry knowledge. Basically, we want to get all the industry people together and say, okay, what do we need? And then, make a course around that, so that, if you really wanted a Haskell job, you could have a one-stop shop for, understanding kind of the skills that you would need, maybe not becoming an expert, but, at least have an understanding of what skills you need in order to work in a professional Haskell setting, right? So to go from hobbyist to professional. Right. Are there any questions so far?
I think we're good. And the more Haskell conferences, the better. So I'm all for it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so funding. So where are we at? This is not a funding ask, like I said. This is more of a, what's the stated, or what's the state of funding for us? And, as we stated above, we're doing okay. We have runway till the end of the year. We would like to expand our efforts, though. And attacking any of these sort of ambitious problems requires funding. We've done, I think, about as much as we can in 4 months. So I think we've got a good track record for it. So, if you know of anybody who's maybe wants their logo on the site and wants a shout out from us, send them our way. We'd like to do more. And we definitely know we can with more funding. We're kind of ready to scale. We're at that point where we're kind of hitting the ceiling in terms of we do enough, but we can probably do more, and we think we have the bandwidth to do it.
A question from earlier, actually, that's very appropriate here. So someone asked if you have examples of what, for example, you could do with different levels of funding. Like, for example, what could you do with 10K of funding per year, or 20K or 50K?
That's more of a question for Andrew, unfortunately, and our budget committee. But for something like 10K, that's I believe 1 month of payroll for us. And if we want to translate it into something like an art budget, okay, just in terms of the things we've already paid for, that would pay for $10,000 would pay for all of our branding that we need to have done. This would help us with paying for CI for the GHC folks for the entire year. This would help, let's see, website hosting costs, as well as, let's see, sort of general miscellaneous budgets. This would help with our podcast stuff. I think for half the year, I think it's roughly $1,000 a month in terms of rental equipment. I couldn't give you concrete answers, but $10,000 goes a long way. It pays for most of the auxiliary things that we need in order to be presentable and to sort of get people the things that they need, as well as many of our internal processes. The primary expense being, payroll, which is expensive. 2 people's expense.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. We will have, we're required by law to have a budget which is presentable at the end of the year. So you can see the breakdown, by next year, that we're pretty tight in terms of what we're spending money on. But one thing that would be really nice to have is, for instance, like, yeah, this is a little bit fuzzy, but it's really nice to have in terms of sort of community stuff. But better swag, better merchandise, better branding. Being able to hire independent artists to help us with our book proposals, to be able to help Ben with some of his tech stuff, to be able to help us with some of our proposals in terms of like getting people bigger boxes. But that stuff is probably going to come either way. It's not a huge expense on our part, but I really like the idea of actually getting like a merchandising or a swag game in general, because I'm pretty sure that the only thing that Haskell has in terms of sort of fun branding, this kind of stuff you'd hang out at conferences, I'm pretty sure the only stickers came from Ed Kmet at one point, where he bought like thousands of them and then just like gave them out like candy all across Europe over the course of several years. So we got no sticker game. I've got a Haskell, I think, like mouse pad that I got from Cafe Press for almost free. But otherwise, we don't have much to show in terms of stuff. And stuff is nice. Everyone loves stuff. But mostly I'd like to focus on, how do we make how do we make Haskell better? So, anything that we give, it's not going to be up to me. I'm not the one that sets the budget. It's going to be Andrew, and it's going to be the board. So, yeah. So the question to ask again is, what do we want? Not what do we need? What do we need is fine. I think we all know what we need, though. Or at least it's very easy. It's one or two people removed from finding out really what we need. But I want to start looking at, what we want. What if HLS had a stable API? What if we had something like an IDE as good as, IntelliJ, for example, for Java, for Haskell? What if we had profiling tools that I could show to a manager in a Fortune 50 company, and he'd go, "Ooh, that's nice." What if coverage generation extracted to like LCOV or other sort of common formats? What if Haskell supported all of the industry standards? What if we had a debugger that really, really worked? That I could debug sort of thunks in my program in a visual way, or like a really easy to understand way? What if error messages had configurable levels of human readability? That kind of thing. I don't want to talk about just kind of what needs fixing. I want to talk about what's going to make us stand out in the future, right? Dependent types and linear types will do that, and that's great. Those are solid sort of academic side improvements to the language that we don't want to get in the way of. I think those are fantastic. I think that's what Haskell stands out because of. But what about this other side, where we start talking about the developer experience and the user experience? What if it was really nice to work in Haskell, more so than it already is? More so in ways that would impress the entire broader programming industry. So I want people to think on that level, right? We're going for very ambitious here. So when you're thinking, try and think really, really big. Not just the sort of anemic. We have a little funding and a few volunteers, but like we have a whole company now that we can throw behind this stuff. So tell us what you really, really want to see. I'd love to hear it. Donations are finally fixed, by the way. Individual contributions are fine. We have a way of restructuring recurring payments and that kind of thing. We've gotten great sort of feedback from folks like Chris Smith, who's CD Smith, who's made a huge contribution actually. So thank you in person. We can have a logo for you. You can get in touch with us at this email here. We appreciate everything, even if it's $100 or $10 or $50. totally fine. You know, as we sort of roll through this this funding cycle and sort of get more ambitious stuff, we'd love to help providing people with you know, rewards for doing so, and just sort of you know, throw a sticker pack at you, or a nice T-shirt or something like that. That'd be pretty cool. Some way of thanking our volunteers, right? Yeah, who doesn't want that HF branded set of programming socks? Okay. Yeah, we need help. I think these are just me at 1:30 at night, just you know, writing down things that I want. Okay, so closing thoughts. I think we're in a good place. I have seen a lot of optimism just at the prospect of the Haskell Foundation, but I see more now that we've been able to kind of bulldoze a few of the walls down and make things a little bit clearer to see where we're going. The text UTF-8 stuff has been huge. We've gotten so much good feedback on a lot of this stuff, not just the text stuff, but on basically everything. That, you know, we're kind of happy to see that people are kind of waking up again and saying, oh yeah, like, you know, there's stuff to work on. There's cool stuff coming down the pipeline in the future, and, you know, I might have a Haskell job in 5 years, which is great. We're not quite there yet. I think we still need to solve the problem of, for instance, getting Cabal in order, and you know, getting that API for GHC so that people can build tools more effectively for the project. But we're getting there, right? I think we'll be in a much better place, a much different situation next year when we come through with funding and we come through with, you know, our more ambitious projects and that kind of thing. I would like to thank Ben Gomari especially for providing so many volunteer hours I can't even count. You're incredible, and I love you as a human being, and you are definitely a huge part of the Haskell Foundation, so thank you. I would like to thank all of our volunteers and board members for donating their time, because it is volunteer work, and we obviously recognize that. We try never to browbeat anyone for not doing anything on time, because it is volunteer, but we, you know, we do like to make sure that we're on time. But, you know, thank you all for contributing. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to our corporate sponsors. We have GitHub, IOHK, Twig, Well-Typed, Obsidian Systems, Slipstone, Mercury, EMQ, Digital Asset, and X-Freight. We're not included just because I don't have logos for them, but also FPCO as well. They've donated. And I think that's it for now. But obviously, more is better. You know, we hope to see you guys in the future, and yeah, things are looking pretty bright. So I'm happy you all stuck through with this update, and happy to answer questions for the next 7 minutes or so. I actually talked more than I thought. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the great talk, Emily. And so, yeah, we can take channels in the talk discussion channel if there are any.
Okay. Let's see. Talk discussion. Where do I start from here?
So I think all the questions that were asked in the channel I've already asked.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, that was fun. Thank you. I didn't think I could talk for a full hour about the Haskell Foundation. Yes, I could. I talk too much these days, so maybe it's just practice. Yeah, thanks for having me. And
I mean, there was a lot of stuff to unpack about the Haskell Foundation, so it makes sense. I think some people may be asking questions now, since I see several people are typing.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Skilmy. And Andreas, it's good to hear. Oh, hey, Chris, thanks.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we're going to stop the broadcast. But of course, you can ask further questions in the channel. And then later tonight at Zurich Hack, we also have the IHP track and the Unison track, and so we'll post links to that in the announcement channel. So once again, thank you, Emily, and bye.